Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Melandros. I'm a senior technical manager here at Decision Foundry, and I'll be taking you through Media Transparency Center and how it works. So, in today, I'll be trying to talk a lot about Media Transparency Center, and there's a couple of elements that I want to cover. That is, first being media planning and the actual delivery data that goes into the Media Transparency Center. Let's go into media planning. So, let me give you an example. So my brother-in-law, he works for as a media planner for an agency in Bangalore, India. So he does not work with the cool data like we do. What he does, he works with the traditional media, that is TV, radio, newspapers, all those traditional media out there. So the way it works for him is, say there is a client of him, an advertiser, who would reach out to him and say there is they have a budget of, let's say, $1 million that they want to spend for the month of December. There's a Christmas New Year campaign that they want to run. And this is the target audience. This is what they're planning, hoping to achieve. And they give all their expectations to him. It is up to him to do the research and go back to them with a plan of how he's going to spend that $1 million. What are the platforms that he's running within that particular platforms? How much, or if it's a TV ad that he's running, what program is going to plan, or what time, what ad is it going to be? A prime time ad, which is going to cost them a lot more, but again the viewership is going to be a lot more. But or is it going to be more of a something not too expensive, but again there can be the iterations could be a lot. So all those decisions he would have made, and he creates a media plan and share it with them and gets the approval, and then it goes live. But again, when it comes to digital media, it gets a little bit more easier and a little bit more trickier as well. But again, you have a lot more control over the data that goes live. Say if something is not working, or working too good, you could make changes to it mid-flight, because you can see the performance of it live. You get a lot of live data, or even if it is a day's delayed, you still get a lot of information within flight of the campaign to make changes, or make updates based off of it. So for a successful media plan in Datorama, there are 7 key elements. The first being the IO key, which is the unique identifier for each insertion order. Let's just call the primary key over here. The IO name, which is basically the description of the insertion order. A start date and end date, which is the flight of the campaign. A capped cost of the budget. The cost type, what is the billing method of that insertion order. The IO rate, at what is the cost at which the insertion order is to be run. And the fixed cost as well. That is, if it is a flat rate campaign that is not entirely dependent on the delivery information. Those are, regardless of how the delivery went, there is a fixed amount that is going to be paid to the publisher. In those cases, we have to map the fixed cost as well. Let's talk a little bit about the delivery data. Again, I do not want to go into a lot of details, but I would encourage you to read about it in your spare time. So say I'm a football fan or soccer fan. Say I missed yesterday's Champions League matches, and I want to know what happened, or what is the scoreline for all the matches out there. So I went into, let's say, goal.com or Sky Sports. There's a lot of ad space that is kept over there. So the moment I go in, the demand side plan, there's a demand that is being created. The demand side platform kicks in. It sends my persona, right? I mean, it says, okay, there's a middle-aged man. Middle-aged is a little out there. Or it says something like, somebody between 25 and 35. So someone who's interested in football, who was searching for Amazon, let's say bicycles on Amazon yesterday. All this information is sent to the ad exchange or the ad networks, who would search within platform, try to understand who all fits the requirements that's being sent. And then, that's a supply side platform over there. There's a supply. So there's a bidding war that happens. Everything happens in microseconds over there. So that bidding war happens. Whichever wins gets to show their ad as the web page loads. So all those things I would encourage you to read about it. I'm just trying to understand what an impression is, what the clicks are, how a conversion is tracked, all those things. Just try to understand whenever you have time. But let's go into the more juicy bit of our presentation. That is a Media Transparency Center itself. As the image shows, there is 2 key elements that goes into the Transparency Center. That is the buy data, that is the media plan, and the delivery information, which is coming from all the individual platforms. But before we get into it, when should you go for Media Transparency Center? When should you opt for it? There's a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot. There's a couple of instances wherein, we started working with a client. They already have purchased MTC. But when we start seeing the data set, they're not in a position to start using the solution at all. The media plan is not there. Even if it is there, delivery data does not have anything in common with the buy data itself or the planning data. So there is no way we can, without manual intervention. So someone who sits and put an Excel together, sitting, okay, this is the media buy key, and this is the media plan. This, it connects to this particular line item over here, and then we make the connection. So if it is something like that, that is going to be a manual intervention. That's going to take a lot of time. It's not exactly solving 100% of the solution over there. I would encourage you to think, go for MTC once you are in a position wherein you have all these things in place. There is some way to connect your buy data. And I would also encourage that there's a way that you can automate the solution as well. That is, automate the process of bringing your planning data into Datorama. It can be as simple as a Google Sheet as well. But again, some ways of automating so that we are not dependent on a human manually uploading a file or emailing that particular planning data into Datorama. Now, let's say you have everything in place. You have purchased MTC, you have a structured media planning file in hand as well. Now, how do you map that particular data into Datorama? So when you're mapping buy data, it needs to be mapped to a bucket called buy data. Only data that is mapped by data goes and sits into the MTC, the IO management section. So make sure you're mapping the data to the buy data section. The IO key needs to be unique. And I would also encourage you to use cost type function as you're mapping the cost type. But again, cost type of inside the brackets, you enter CSV of, whatever the header is. Make sure you're mapping fixed cost if there is flat rate campaigns that you're running as well. A few details on the different cost types that we see in the platform that are by default unlisted by Datorama. Now, we talked about flat rate as well. Now, let's say there is a custom calculation that the client wants. Say, for example, they are looking at cost per interaction or something like that. So I've created a dummy use case over here for us to go through. Here we go. So the way that you would do it is go to your workspace settings. So the account settings over here, then go to workspace settings. There is something called as cost center. Here you have to define your cost type and what is the billable metric over there. So we were talking about cost per interactions. A couple of things that I want you to make a note of. One, the display name. This needs to match the cost type that is coming through the buy data. If it's CPABC, that is what is mentioned in your buy data. You call that out over here. So this needs to match against whatever is coming through your buy data. The measurement over here, it has to be a mapped metric. Datorama will not be calculated measurements over here as your billable measurement. So if it is, say, something like CPM, that is, you have impressions divided by 1,000 or something that you have to do, make sure you do the aggregation. You push the data back in into the system, create a re-immersion data stream, map it into a delivery custom metric, and then use that as your measurement for calculating your billable metric. And one more thing that I want you to notice, the logic after here is pretty straightforward. That is, whatever measurement that we are mapping over here into the IO rate. So just as I mentioned before, if there is any sort of logic that needs to be applied before, create a re-immersions data stream, map it as a metric, and then use that over here. Going back. Now, how do we tie the two data sets together? So the first solution is the most straightforward out there. That is, you have your, let's say, the ad group ID that is synced back into your buy data, and then you're just querying everything together in your buy data stream. So I had one client that I've worked with wherein what they were doing was, as they create the campaign, they were syncing the data back into the Salesforce. So we were using SQL query to pull the data into Datorama. So we had the IO keys and the media buy keys being mapped in a single stream. So there's everything in one place. So as and when the delivery data came in, the mapping already was in place. You're connected already, right? It was a pretty easy solution that we had in place. A typical solution would look like something about the second one over here, wherein we associate individual IOs with the delivery item. So take, for example, a Media Ocean campaign that we are running, or the media plan is coming through Media Ocean. So Media Ocean has something called as a placement ID in place. So what we see a lot of clients who use Media Ocean do is they take the placement ID they create the placement ID first in Media Plan, which is done a few months before. And when they actually create the campaigns in your delivery platforms, let's say Facebook, they make sure to include the placement ID as part of their campaign name or ad group name. So as and when we get the data in, what we do is we extract the placement ID from the campaign name or ad group name. we have something common now with your buy data, right? So we use that to combine both the data set together, create a reimmersion stream, and tie them together. That is one way of looking at it. The third solution is an MTC classification. So there is field in an ads bucket called media by IO classification. You could directly map, let's say, for your placement ID itself, you can directly map it over there and map your placement ID equivalent in your buy data stream as well for them to get connected. So in most of the cases, we kind of tie these two together. That is the second and third solution together. Wherein the first solution goes at a more granular level, that is at an ad group level over there. And the classification is something that we use to tie data at one level higher. Say, for example, if you have something like a package ID, that is a group of multiple, let's say, media buys that we have, and we want to combine it together based on the opportunity amount or the group amount over there. We use MTC classification for it. So with the one connection itself, we get data set combined together, two different granularities. Now let's look at a couple of key metrics that I want you to learn as you are learning MTC. I've created a dummy data set over here. So I want you to focus a little bit on the first line over here. That is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the IU key. You have your start date and day. That is October 1st to October 31st. A budget is assigned of $100. It's a CPM campaign at a rate of 0.75. Then you're looking at a delivery data over here, which is all the way from October 1st to October 12th. You have your campaign name, insertion order, group ID, ad group ID, name, the impression, and clicks over there. Now, if you're looking at the MTC, what it does, the first part is your delivery data. The first check to do is check if the date is within the flight, the delivery data. The date over here is October 1 to October 12th. Let's go back to the buy data. It is well within the flight period over here. So it can get connected. So MTC connects your delivery data to your buy data over here. Perfectly so far, so good. Now comes the slightly tricky part, wherein there are two key metrics over here. That is, first being recalculated cost. Of the lot, this is the pretty most straightforward calculation over here. So wherein, since it's a CPM campaign, it is impressions divided by 1,000 into whatever the rate is. Let me apply that over here for all the dates. And recalculated cost is basically the cumulative of it over the time. So this plus all the data over there. So you get, if you look at it, the total recalculated cost comes all the way to $178, which is quite a bit higher than the total budget that we have. Now that's where the actualized cost comes in. So what actualized cost does is, it is basically an if condition on top of your recalculated cost. That is, if recalculated cost is higher than the budget, then return the budget itself, or else return the cost. So as you can see, the moment the cost goes above the budget over here, it stops. The actualized cost stops, or it gets capped over there at your budget. Now, cost by day over here. So it's this one. The previous. So per day. Same thing. The difference between recalculated cost by day and actualized cost by day is from when it goes above the budget. Until then, both remain the same. And remaining budget as well, another pretty important one to remember. So total budget minus the actualized cost gives you the remaining budget as well. So if you learn this much information, you'll be able to troubleshoot maybe 60 to 70% of the troubles that comes with some of the issues that are there in MTC. Let me go back to the presentation. Now let's talk about a few frequently asked questions or common mistakes that I see when setting up the MTC. Why are my delivery data falling into the other bucket? That is, let's say you've created a pivot table in Datorama, you have media by key, and you have added any IO field, any by data field, and it's showing us other over there. Why is that happening? Most common reason is, if you remember when I was looking at the delivery versus buy data connection, the first thing I checked was the date. And that is the most probable culprit over here as well. That is, let's say we were looking at a buy data or the flight of October 1 to October 31st. The delivery that I was looking at was from November 1st. I have, let's say 50,000 impressions over there. It's quite a lot. But again, the delivery is outside the flight, which means Datorama will not associate that delivery against that insertion order. So unless that media buy has any other insertion orders or the IOs it can get connected to, it'll fall under the other bucket because it's not associated to any. Another common issue that we see is the numbers are much higher than expected. Why? So if a single media buy or a single campaign is associated with multiple insertion orders or multiple IO keys, then you would see a duplication of the numbers. That is, both these IO keys would use the media buy key to calculate, or it assigns its budget to that particular media buy key. And in both the places, you are seeing, the actualized cost and recalculated cost being calculated, which results in duplication of the numbers going higher. That's the most common case of, when the numbers are much higher. There could be a lot of other reasons as well, but this is the most common use case. What's the difference between actualized was recalculated? We talked about it. Always on campaigns, that is, there are few campaigns which does not really come with an end date in the near future. So it's going to run for a very long period. So the question number one, will Datorama be able to handle it? The short answer is yes. There are typically two ways that I see the always on campaign being set up. One, it is broken down into individual months. If so, and even then, I would still recommend you to use recalculated cost over there as you are, visualizing it, so that because again, there is a lot of changes you can make to the budget over the period because it's going to run for a very long period, and the budget is usually just evenly distributed, or you're just breaking it evenly just so that you can give each month a separate budget. So reusing a recalculated cost over there would really help. The other way is, you create one single IO key which has a very long flight. The end date is so far in the future or something like that. Again, the use case over here would be to use recalculated cost in your visualization over actualized cost so that you're not cutting off the budget over there. Some of the common visuals that I see is, again, the most common one that I end up using is the goals and the gauge widgets over here and the tables over here. In the goal itself, there are typically two visualizations that clients wants to see. One, for the entire quarter, or whatever time period, if it's a month, the total budget against it, how are we delivering? And the second being as of today. That is, take for example, we have $1,000 that is expected to deliver for the month of December. So let's say we are on the 12th of December or 15th of December. So how much should have spent? That is, 1,000 divided by 31 into how many days have elapsed. That would give you how much we should have spent and versus what we've actually delivered. Those calculations happen. You can use expected revenue as the metric for your calculations over there in those visualizations. Those are very powerful, both of them telling slightly different stories, but again, very useful information for them to have. That is, say, for example, if we are, as of today, if we are only at 80% of our expected delivery, which means we are falling far behind on the monthly or, at the end of the period as well. So that is both quite powerful visualizations to have. Booked versus delivered, that's again very useful information, especially if you're checking the team's delivery on a regular basis. Before I close, I want you to take you through a couple of powerful Datorama apps that is kind of tied towards the MTC itself. First being media pacing. I find this app to be very useful, very colorful, and it comes with Einstein marketing by default included as well. So it's very useful that from every time that I've used. The other being the media planning center. It comes with, it gives you the ability to add 5 dimensions. So this is usually a replacement if you do not have a media plan in hand. So what Datorama does is, based on whatever, once you set up the media planning center, it creates a generic stream and a couple of calculated dimensions and measurements in the backend to set up the entire process so that it acts as a replacement for your media plan if required. We've come to the end of my presentation over here. So let me take you through a quick summary of everything that we've went through. First thing, when to go for MTC, I would recommend you to use opt for MTC or MTC as a solution if you have the data to support it. Understanding the difference between recalculated costs and actualized costs solves a lot of your problems. Just summarize, say, for example, if the finance team reaches out to you and says the numbers that they have calculated is a lot higher than what Datorama is reporting. Typically, it is because recalculated cost matches against theirs. It could be because the delivery is outside of the flight, or there is some sort of difference. There's a manual error, human error that happened. All of this we will be able to first immediately pick up if we know the difference between recalculated versus actualized cost. And there's a lot of human manual hours that we could save by using of MTC itself. So without MTC, you would end up collating all the reports from individual delivery platforms, creating a pivot, creating a report, then tying it back to your delivery data manually, and all those hours and hours of effort just to pull a report, Datorama will be able to do it immediately. Just a quick reminder before I close, the recording of this webinar will be available and posted on our YouTube, and you can also find in our website. Everything, including the Excel sheet that I was using, will be uploaded along with instructions on the platform. The next episode on data communication, you're going to expect that to come out very soon. And please do go through our dashboards on our website. We are famous for creating beautiful, innovative dashboards. Please do go through it. And if you're in need of training, please do reach out to us. We have professionally trained trainers that is ready to take you through from the very basics all the way getting you on the platform and certified as well. Thank you so much, and see you next time.